They told my wife I was dead. By the time I came home, she had already moved on. The mines erupted almost in unison. Just for a few heartbeats, the entire jungle lit up in bursts of flame. Then came the thunderous blast, echoing through the trees. Above the massive hangar, a fireball soared into the air, casting a surreal glow over the dark canopy. Not long after that, the ammunition depot caught fire. Pieces of its structure, chunks of roof, shards of wall, were hurled in all directions by the force. And then the real chaos began. Shells and rockets stored inside started to ignite, one after another. It was like watching a 4th of July show, only 1,000 times louder and deadlier. The sky lit up with streaks of fire and bursts of color, strangely beautiful, almost nostalgic. For a split second, it took me back to childhood nights on my granddad's porch, watching fireworks with sticky hands and wide eyes. Then the gunships came. Low and steady they closed in. As they neared the treetops, they let loose with round after round of unguided rockets. Trails of white smoke laced the early morning sky. I watched in grim silence as one aircraft banked slightly, almost skimming the jungle canopy, wings tilting with practiced ease. Ahead of us, maybe 500 meters, flames erupted again, followed by a new wave of explosions. Thick, dark smoke started rising, curling upward through the foliage. We knew then we'd been made. They saw us. It was time to move. We sprinted for the nearest gap in the dense brush. Just then a loud crack split the air. A burst of gunfire snapped against the thin armor of the helicopters. 2 or 3 rounds sizzled through the air, close but they missed. "Load up," barked Comet, my squad leader, yanking at my shoulder. "I'll catch the next bird." I hit the ground hard, face pressed against scorched African grass, trying to stay low. All around me, dirt exploded into the air, fountains of dust and shredded turf kicked up by a rain of bullets. Stone chips and bits of metal stung my skin. We didn't waste time. Within minutes, everyone was where they needed to be. I was just getting my bearings when I caught the moment, just a flash, when enemy fire struck the river. The explosion tore through the water like lightning, sending a spray of fire and blood in every direction. It was brutal. It was fast. I turned to look for Comet. He was gone. So it caught my gaze and gave me a slow, deliberate nod. I swallowed hard. My ears were ringing, but not from the blast. Something deeper. Something breaking. Behind us, a thick column of smoke climbed higher and higher into the sky. I stared at it for a moment, then everything went dark. I'd been hit badly. The medic said I lost too much blood. When I woke up in the hospital, they told me I had been touch and go for a while. It was a dangerous wound. Some don't come back from those. But somehow I did. Funny how moments like that make everything else sharper. I grew up without my mother. She left when I was just a baby, barely a year old. My dad raised me. For years I didn't even know where she was. Later I found out she had become the head physician at a major medical center. Turns out she's brilliant, some kind of visionary in her field. A real leader. Life's strange that way. I'm still in the army, for now. But in my heart, I know this chapter is over. I've done my part. It's time for something new. Time to put my energy where it matters most, into family. Sasha and I are getting married soon. We're expecting. And yeah, it looks like grandkids might not be far off either. We just bought a cozy 2-bedroom apartment, and plans are already in motion to build a cottage in one of the nicer parts of town. If all goes well, construction starts in early September. I had only been gone a few days on a work trip when everything started to unravel. When I called Madison, my wife's assistant, she paused before answering, like she was trying to gather her thoughts. Then she let out this low hum and said, "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." And just like that, she hung up. No goodbye. Nothing. I stood there in the hotel lobby, still holding the phone to my ear, completely blank. What just happened? I flagged down a cab and headed straight home, heart racing the whole way. When I stepped through the door of our apartment, a strange feeling hit me. The place was lifeless, like no one had lived there in weeks. I ran my hand along the edge of the kitchen table, and when I looked at my fingers, they were covered in dust. The silence was too loud. Something was very wrong. "Karen has to be here," I mumbled to myself, trying to keep calm as I rushed over to her office building. But when I got there, the security guard didn't even let me pass the entrance. "Access is by invitation only, sir," he said with a straight face. Strict orders. No invite, no entry. I tried to stay composed, not wanting to create a scene. "Can you at least tell her I'm here?" I asked, doing my best to sound reasonable. He seemed to hesitate. Then he spoke softly into the mic clipped to his chest. A few minutes later, the door opened and out stepped a woman I didn't recognize, young, professional looking. She walked straight up to me, handed me a small envelope, and then turned and left without a word. No sign of Karen. As I stood there, confused, I suddenly caught sight of someone I did know. Ryan, her deputy. He had visited our company plenty of times for joint meetings. I stepped toward him, gently taking him by the arm. "Hey Ryan," I said, keeping my tone polite. "Do you know where Karen is?" He froze for a second, eyes wide, before forcing a nervous smile. "She's okay," he said, but I noticed the way his eyes flicked toward the far end of the hall behind him. That was all I needed. I started walking slowly in the direction he'd glanced, my legs moving on instinct even though my mind felt numb. Somewhere in the back of my brain, a storm of thoughts swirled. Who was with her now? How far had this gone? Then I saw her. Or at least, I saw what was left of the moment. Karen was being carried out, unconscious, by 2 staff members. I didn't get the full picture, but the look on her face. I'll never forget it. Then came the worst part. Our daughter Lily was there. She walked up to me, arms crossed, face tight with anger. "You ruined everything," she said, her voice sharp and cold. She didn't even call me Dad. Just turned her back on me and walked away. The guards escorted me to the door. I didn't resist. When I got home, I noticed our wedding photo on the shelf, still sitting there but covered in a fine layer of dust like everything else. I stared at it for a moment, then sighed, turned around, and closed the door behind me. That chapter was over. I had to let it go. I needed somewhere to stay. A fresh start. I pulled out my phone and started scanning rental listings. There were plenty of options, and eventually I found one. A small studio apartment in the older part of town. It wasn't much, but it was affordable. And right now, I just needed 4 walls and a roof over my head. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number from the ad. The address led me to a small, weather-worn 2-story house made of red brick. The kind of place that had once been proud but now wore its age without shame. The rental unit was upstairs. The room they gave me had a broken leg on the coffee table, propped up by a stack of old hardcover books. Across from the worn-out couch stood a metal-framed bed, the kind topped with shiny nickel-plated balls, like miniature cannonballs, at both ends. Once upon a time, the walls had probably been covered with paintings, even in the kitchen. But now all that remained were nail holes and pale rectangles of untouched wallpaper where the sun hadn't faded the colors. The landlord was an older woman. She caught me looking at a beat-up guitar resting in the corner. "It still plays," she said with a crooked smile. I stepped over and gently ran my fingers across the strings. They rattled under my touch. Brittle, half-snapped notes filled the silence like a sigh. That's when I heard it, a subtle, scraping sound near the keyhole. Someone was fumbling with the lock from the outside. When the lock didn't budge, everything went quiet again. I stood up, instinctively alert. For a few seconds, there was nothing but stillness behind the door. "You can't just hide from your problems," I muttered under my breath. "You have to face them." I moved to the door, turned the key, and yanked it open. The landing was half-drenched in shadow. A single weak fly-covered bulb hung from the ceiling, barely illuminating the stairwell. Off to the right, someone shifted. I turned, and there she was. The same woman I'd seen before. The one who looked like she lived in the margins of the city. She didn't say a word. Just walked past me and went into the bathroom. A few seconds later, I heard the shower start running. I stood there, unsure what to do, then grabbed a towel from my duffel bag and slowly opened the bathroom door, expecting the curtain to be drawn. But it wasn't. She stood in the deep, cast-iron tub, letting the water run at full blast. Her back was to me and she was scrubbing herself furiously, humming a soft tune. There was something oddly powerful about the scene. Raw. Honest. Like a sculpture coming to life under a cascade of water. She wasn't just washing off the grime. She was shedding a life. I stepped back, pulling the door closed behind me. And I realized, I had to get out of that room before she noticed how long I'd been staring. The truth is, I hadn't been with anyone since I left on that last business trip. Being faithful wasn't something I had to try hard at. It just came with the territory. I always believed beautiful women were like luxury sports cars. Nice to admire, maybe even dream about, but in reality? Too much work. High maintenance. Prone to trouble. Not worth the risk, especially when you're already married. Back in the kitchen, I set about making a quick meal. I dug out some sausage and a can of stew from my bag. I placed a tray of eggs on the counter, cracked a few onto the griddle, and tossed the rest of the can into a saucepan to warm. Using my old tactical knife, I sliced the bread thick and rough. The smell of food began to replace the mustiness of the old apartment. From the fridge, I pulled out a carton of birch juice, still cold, and poured it into a wide glass. I stepped back, looking at the simple meal I had thrown together. Eggs, meat, bread, juice. Bon appetit, I said quietly to no one in particular. I placed the plate in front of her, setting the fork down gently on the table. She glanced at it, then looked up at me with a guilty expression. Do you, have a knife too? I didn't say anything. Just nodded and quietly placed a table knife beside her plate. She took it slowly, like she wasn't sure what came next. Then her voice broke the silence. Wait, are you really Edward? She asked, her tone trembling. There's been some horrible mistake. They told me you died 6 months ago. I saw the paperwork. They said your helicopter went down in flames, and your body was never recovered. That's what they told me, at the enlistment office. Her words landed like a punch to the chest. They told you that at the enlistment office? I asked, stunned. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. Yes. They even showed me the telegram from your unit. That's why there was never a funeral. They said there was nothing left to bury. There was a pause as her voice cracked. Edward, I got sick not long after that. They put me in the hospital. And before I could even understand what had happened, I heard you were married. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. I'm sorry, I muttered, feeling like my words were too small for the moment. I didn't know. Everything just happened so fast. She nodded weakly. Maybe I overreacted. It hurt. You being gone and then suddenly not being gone. And then hearing about someone else. My chest tightened. I felt a pang of shame that twisted into something else, something baser. It had been a long time since I'd been with anyone. And that part of me, raw and selfish, started whispering. Then she surprised me. I'll do it, she said suddenly, barely above a whisper. If you'll let me stay here for a few days, you can spend the night with me. I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. But you can't kick me out afterward, she added quickly. Not if I'm not what you expected. I'm not a prostitute, Edward. I haven't been with anyone in a long time. Not since I was assaulted. Her voice faded. She looked me right in the eyes and something inside me shifted. Her honesty was like sunlight cutting through fog, blinding, impossible to look away from. My mouth opened, but I didn't know what to say. Before I could figure it out, I was pulled back into a memory. There we were, high over the river, trying to connect with the supply chopper. The air was hot and still. I was focused on the comms when it hit us. A Stinger missile launched from the right bank came out of nowhere. It slammed into the side of our bird, dead center. We never even saw it coming. The contact fuse lit up instantly, and the steel beast we were flying turned into a mass of fire and twisted metal. Pieces of rotor and fuselage rained into the water below. We had no time to react, just impact, then chaos. I thought I'd died that day. But instead, I woke up, and the hardest part wasn't the wounds or the rehab. It was facing the life that kept moving without me. That morning, I thought the most important thing on my agenda would be seeing Karen again. I didn't expect all of this. I splashed water on my face, scratched my chest, and told myself to get moving. When I opened the door to leave, Natasha was already standing there. It's all getting cold, she said quietly. We had breakfast together, scrambled eggs and stew. I sipped a glass of tea, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and went to get dressed. T-shirt, sweater, military-issue winter jacket. As I tied my boots, I told her, "Stay home today, okay? Don't go anywhere." I headed out. About 3 meters from the entrance, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, smoking. The windows were cracked just enough for the smoke to drift upward in gray spirals. They didn't look at me. Nothing seemed unusual, but I filed it away in the back of my mind. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor and reached the apartment. Everything looked normal, but something felt off. I slid the key into the lock and turned it carefully. Click. The door opened. But that didn't make sense, because when I'd left the night before, I'd locked it with 2 full turns. Someone was inside. It couldn't be Karen, she wasn't supposed to arrive for another 2 hours. A chill ran through me as I reached for the handle. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted them just as I turned the corner, 2 police officers hurrying into the building. I didn't stop to wonder why. Instinct kicked in. I ducked into the stairwell, leaned my bag and gear gently against the wall, and slipped outside to the nearby bus stop. Within minutes, I was wedged in the middle of a packed city bus, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, swaying with every turn like some kind of dangling sausage. That was it then. Something was definitely going down. But whose trap was it? Just one question kept running through my mind. Who set this up? Because clearly someone had. And if they had footage of me, it was going to be from the cameras in the entryway. I'd helped install them myself back when this was still my world, before everything fell apart. But my jacket had a high collar and I kept my head turned, eyes down. No one would recognize me, not right away. I pulled out my phone and dialed Karen's number. No answer. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Karen stirred in bed, reaching across the sheets, but Dennis wasn't there. She slipped out from under the blanket, wrapped herself in a robe and padded barefoot into the kitchen. Nothing. The bathroom? Empty too. An odd tightness began to grow in her chest. Where is he? She wondered. Maybe he just ran to the store? Then she saw it. A white slip of paper on the table, pinned under an empty coffee cup. She picked it up, sat on the stool and read the words silently. I'm sorry, but I've fallen in love with someone else. The sentence cut straight through her, simple and cold. Just like that, Dennis was gone. Afterward, she reconnected with someone from her past. His name was Matthew, a man who'd grown into someone far more powerful than the boy she'd once known. He'd transferred back from the capital to take up a prestigious role, chairman of the regional court. Impressive, sharp, commanding. His personal life was a mess, but he never lost his charm. And when he came calling again, determined to pull Karen back into his orbit, she didn't resist for long. No, she hadn't stopped loving me. Not really. We had years behind us, memories, moments, a life. But Matthew had power. And power changes everything. They started meeting in secret. Karen was torn between us. She wasn't sure who to choose, or maybe she didn't want to choose at all. Maybe the decision was already made for her by money, comfort, and influence. Maybe love never had a say in the matter. In the end, the truth was unavoidable. Matthew was Sasha's father. And just like that, the family reassembled around him like nothing had happened. And me? I was left with nothing. 20 years just gone. She walked out like it was a weight off her shoulders, like it was some overdue resolution. I can't even say if she ever really loved me, or if she just grew comfortable with me, settled into what was easy. No, I don't know. I probably never will. And Sasha, my daughter, her betrayal cut the deepest. That's what hurt more than anything. Not the marriage. Not even Karen. It was Sasha. I raised her. I gave everything for her. And in the end, she shut me out like I never mattered. My thoughts kept circling, relentless, gray crows flapping in a storm, always coming back to her, to what I'd lost. I couldn't take it anymore. I broke down and cried. Later, I found myself at the military registration office, gripping a folded prescription in my hand. The duty officer behind the glass stared at the paper like it was some ancient relic. He didn't say a word, just slid it back to me and pointed toward room 16. The hallway was chipped, paint peeling in wide flakes. I walked to the door and knocked but didn't wait. I pushed it open and stepped inside. There was a desk. Behind it sat a weary-looking major with a pale, sagging face, his uniform stained and shiny from too many years of use. He didn't even glance at me. Wait in the hall, he said flatly. No emotion. No welcome. Just another wall to run into. I don't have much time, the woman on the other end of the line said. Then came a long pause. Her voice softened, almost guilty. You didn't know, did you? Know what? I asked, already feeling something sink in my chest. Your father passed away. 3 months ago, she said gently. We've contacted everyone involved in the estate, everyone but you. The reading of the will is tomorrow. Your presence is necessary. I stood frozen, the words echoing in my head like a dull punch to the ribs. 3 months? I didn't even know. My father and I, we hadn't spoken in years. After my mother left, ran off with someone else, he was never the same. Her betrayal broke something in him. And somewhere along the line, that bitterness toward her twisted and settled on me. I became the ghost of her mistakes. The son of the woman who'd left him behind. Over time he pulled away. Avoided me. I stopped reaching out after a while. Figured I was just a reminder he didn't want. Now he was gone. And I was the last to know. Later that evening, I sat down at a weathered table. Someone, probably Natasha, had placed a small, neatly sliced loaf of bread beside an open bottle of vodka, beads of condensation rolling down the glass. 2 shot glasses stood waiting. Smart girl, I murmured to myself. Across from me, the military commander, a man I hadn't seen in ages, picked up the bottle and poured. Welcome back, Colonel, he said with a firm nod. We clinked glasses, the sound sharp and honest. We downed the shots and chased them with a quick bite. I'm glad you made it, he added. There's been a lot of talk around here. You know, they thought you died out there. They said it was a hero's death. He leaned in slightly. One guy in particular even submitted a commendation on your behalf. We sent it through as soon as that funeral letter showed up. I didn't know what to say. I was alive, but in some ways, Maybe that man really had died out there. The one I used to be. Later, I stepped into a hot wash trying to shake off the weight of the day. The feeling of returning to what looked like a life, but felt like an illusion. A bottle in the kitchen. A warm meal on the table. It all looked like home. But home was long gone. We took a cab through town, stopping at a string of boutiques. Natasha was shy at first, kept to herself, barely spoke, but as we moved from store to store, her eyes lit up. I bought her a pair of proper winter boots. A thick wool jacket. A soft scarf, gloves, a matching suit. Even a cocktail dress that made her blush. I don't know why, but I picked out a robe and slippers too. And a few of those special items she grabbed off the shelf which, truth be told, I still have no idea what they were for. She smiled. Genuinely. Her cheeks were flushed with color, not from cold, but from something lighter. Hope maybe. I didn't mind. In fact, I liked seeing her that way. Felt good. There was even a flicker of something primal in me, a low hum that had been quiet for too long. That kind of energy that rises when you know someone else might want what you have. Testosterone rising like a tide. I poured myself another shot of vodka from a bottle shaped like one of those old-fashioned divers, misted over from the fridge. The liquor hissed down my throat and settled warm in my gut. I reached for a salty pickle to chase it. And for a moment, just one brief, fragile moment, it felt like something close to peace. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth of the vodka settle in, a strange sort of pleasure washing over me. There's a kind of rule with vodka. You don't drink it alone. Not if you've got any sense. It's meant to be shared and always with something sharp on the side. A pickle, maybe a green tomato. Something to chase it with, something that bites back. The place was buzzing now. Low lights, clinking glasses, muted laughter. I glanced toward the far end of the room just as someone leaned in close to Sasha, whispering something in her ear. She pulled back, clearly not amused. The guy, a loud, heavy-set drunk in a cheap jacket, didn't take her hint. Instead, he grabbed her roughly by the arm and yanked her toward the dance floor. Her friends at the table, some young guys in mismatched jackets, stood up and started to object, but the drunk ignored them completely. He kept dragging Sasha, his grip firm, his intentions obvious. That's when Dennis stood up. He'd been sitting across from her, quiet all evening. But now he was scanning the room looking for someone, probably the administrator. But whoever that was had disappeared. Gone like smoke. And it was becoming clear that the new stepdad, the one who liked to throw his weight around, wasn't going to back off. Then it happened. A blur of motion, and suddenly the drunk was airborne, lifted clean off his feet. He crashed down onto the marble floor with a sickening thud, his skull bouncing off the tiles with a hollow crack that silenced the room. The force of the impact sent him sliding a few feet before his head collided with the Christmas tree in the center of the hall, scattering ornaments like broken promises. He didn't move after that. Someone in the back muttered, "He flew." Sasha turned to me wide-eyed, frozen in place. I met her gaze for a moment, then looked over at Vera and gave a small shrug. What else could I say? I walked calmly back to our table, poured myself another shot, and downed it in one smooth swallow. "It's time to go," I said, turning to Natasha. She gave me a small nod. As we made our way toward the exit, I caught sight of a woman I hadn't noticed before, a waitress maybe. She was lighting a long cigarette, ash falling carelessly into a wide glass ashtray. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat in front of her. I didn't recognize her face, but I remembered something else. The last time I spoke to my father on the phone, he mentioned he had remarried. I never did find out what happened to his previous wife, my mother. "All right, everyone's here. Can we get started?" A voice called out impatiently. A heavily made-up woman fidgeted in her chair, tapping her manicured nails on the table. From the corner of the room, a thin man in a gray suit stepped forward, a leather folder tucked under his arm. "We need to wait a little longer," he said. "One person is still missing." Everyone turned toward the entrance. Then the front door creaked open. Natasha walked in. She looked around slowly, her eyes landing on me, and staying there just a second too long. Then she turned away, sitting down in one of the empty chairs without saying a word. It felt like she had built a wall in an instant. Whatever bridge we had was gone, or at least heavily guarded. And honestly, I didn't blame her. Too many shocks for one day. The lawyer let out a relieved breath and gave the notary a small nod. "We can begin." The notary sat down, opened the file, and adjusted his glasses. "This is the last will and testament," he said, "of the late Ivan Levin, signed and filed 1 month before his passing." Everyone leaned in slightly, the weight of the moment settling over the room. And just like that, the past caught up with us. I caught a glimpse of the screen as the notary flipped to the next document. For just a second, it flashed an image, a photo half-blurred but unmistakable. She, barely clothed, wrapped in the arms of some muscle-bound guy who looked like he belonged in a cologne ad. And then, across the room I saw her. Natasha. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, cold, distant, like all the light inside had gone out. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the office. Fast. Too fast. So quick, I didn't even have time to react. Didn't get the chance to say anything. Not even a hollow congratulations for the inheritance she'd just landed. I figured she'd be waiting outside. But when I stepped through the front doors, nothing. She was gone. Strange. What was it that made her bolt like that? Shame? Betrayal? Maybe just the weight of too many unspoken things. I turned back toward the office and saw Vera still seated, uncertain, looking as lost as I felt. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I stood awkwardly, fingers twitching from nerves I hadn't felt in years. She looked up at me, eyes wide, unsure whether to smile or cry. She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt, the motion so graceful I remembered, just for a moment, how beautiful she really was. How effortlessly sensual. You said, you wanted to talk, she said, her voice cautious. But my reply came out sharp. Too sharp. Blunt and cold, the words cut before I could stop them. I was still burning from the last hour. She flinched. What happened? She asked, confused by my tone. I looked around, scanning for the waitress, not knowing what I was even hoping to find. Dennis was arrested, I finally said. Her hand flew to her mouth and her voice cracked. Edward, I don't know what to do. I never imagined it would come to this. Calm down, I told her. Just start from the beginning. What happened? She nodded, then dropped her gaze to the floor. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I wasn't thinking. I didn't think at all. She looked up again, eyes glistening, voice trembling. If it hadn't been for Sasha, I never would have left you. She meant it. I could tell. Once, that would have shattered me. Just hearing her voice break like that would have been enough to make me drop everything. Once upon a time, her tears had power. But not now. Now all I felt was heat. Not from desire or regret. From rage. A slow, steady burn that left no room for compassion. I want to give it all back, she whispered. Since you returned, I can't sleep. I can't live with it. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Later I sat across from my mother. She'd asked me to visit. The room was quiet, heavy with questions we hadn't asked in years. Do you know what you'll do next? She asked. I shook my head. No plans, I said. Not yet. She hesitated. Are you married? I said. Divorced recently. She looked at me then, not judging, not prying. Just a soft look, full of something I hadn't seen in a while. Sympathy. But it didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel tired. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I wasn't about to open my soul to someone who'd been a stranger for most of my life. I kept my eyes steady, my mouth closed. She must have felt it. The wall between us. I understand, she said softly, that all you can probably feel toward me is hate. But, please believe me when I say not a single day goes by that I don't think about you. She paused, hands trembling in her lap. Your father, he was a cruel man. I only survived 1.5 years with him before I couldn't take it anymore. She looked down. Yes, I left you when you were still just a little boy. And for that I'll carry the guilt forever. But I didn't run away to some fantasy. I had nothing. No money, no one. A friend took pity on me, let me stay in her apartment. Got me a job as a waitress at a little cafe. Her voice started to break. That's where I met Ahmed, she said, eyes distant. He swept in like a storybook. Said everything I wanted to hear. Promised marriage. A new life. He told me he wanted me to meet his family, that we'd start over in Egypt. She gave a bitter smile. I believed him. Her fingers twisted nervously. But there were no parents. No wedding. Just a cage I couldn't escape. For 3 years I lived in hell. I told myself it was punishment, for abandoning you. Her voice faltered again. Then she reached into her purse and placed something gently on the coffee table, a thick envelope. Here's some money, she said quietly. Please take it. I looked at her, trying to meet her eyes, trying to find something I could recognize there. Is this supposed to make up for everything? I asked. Is this the price for motherly love? My tone was sharp, the words hitting harder than I intended. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Her shoulders folded inward. She shrank into herself, lowered her head, and stood. Without another word, she walked into the hallway. I didn't follow. At the door she paused, her back still turned. Then she glanced over her shoulder, tears streaking down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Forgive me, son." And then she was gone. I didn't chase her. Not this time. Some ties were cut too deep to knot back together. Yesterday, maybe, she still felt something for me. But today? Today it was clear. She'd stepped over me like a memory she'd rather forget. Outside, I took off one glove and lifted my hand to the sky. Snowflakes fell gently into my palm. Fragile. Unsure. As if even they were hesitant to land. The moment they touched my skin, they melted instantly. Gone before they even had the chance to linger. Just like that flicker of hope I'd let myself feel, for healing, for connection, for something as simple as peace. Everything around me was blanketed in white. The path, the trees, even the rose bushes tucked under burlap wraps for winter. The world had gone still. Only the snow finches brought color, tiny red flashes darting between branches, reminders that life carried on whether you were ready for it or not.